Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Sukhdev Singh, and today we are diving into a topic that's on every academic librarian's mind right now: AI in the academic library. Not the hype version, not the panic version, but the real, working intersection of exploration and strategic application. You've probably seen the two overlapping circles on this slide, and that image is exactly the point. AI and the academic library aren't separate worlds bumping into each other anymore. They're overlapping, and that overlap is where the interesting work is actually happening. Over the next several minutes, I want to walk you through where the profession stands right now, where the friction points are, and what this means for how we think about our own competencies going forward. So if you are a librarian, a LIS student, or just someone curious about how institutions are adapting, stay with me. Let's start with the data on where we actually stand today. So here's the first number that should grab your attention. 90% of academic librarians recognize AI as a legitimate institutional tool. That's not a fringe opinion anymore, that's near universal acceptance. But look at the number right next to it. Only 47% report having formal AI guidelines in place. Let that gap sink in for a second. We have a profession that has essentially said yes to AI, while the institutions around us are still catching up on the paperwork. This isn't just an academic curiosity either. This comes from a 2026 global survey of 311 academic librarians across 31 countries. So it's a genuinely broad snapshot. What this tells me is that practice is running ahead of policy, and that gap is exactly where risk lies. When people are already using a tool but nobody's written down how it should be used responsibly, that's a governance vacuum. And vacuums like that don't stay empty for long. Let's look at how this plays out differently depending on where you are in the world. Now this is where things get really interesting from a global perspective. If you look at APAC and India, the focus is on broader day-to-day integration. Librarians here are using AI heavily for writing support, editing, and direct research assistance, and there's a growing curiosity about regional models like DeepSeek alongside the standard platforms. Compare that to the UK, Ireland, and Canada, where the focus shifts toward measured integration and safeguarding. Their primary applications are reliability testing, ethics governance, and protecting academic integrity, with core concerns centered on trust, transparency, and responsible use before anything gets deployed. So essentially, one region is asking how do we use this more, and the other is asking how do we use this safely. Neither approach is wrong. They're responding to different institutional pressures and risk tolerances. But if you are building a global AI strategy for libraries, you can't apply one template everywhere. Context matters enormously. Now let's talk about what's actually enabling or blocking this adoption on the ground. Every capability on this slide has a matching friction point, and that pairing is deliberate. On the capability side, we are talking about faster information retrieval, personalized user services, improved operational efficiency, and stronger research support through things like chatbots, natural language processing, and automated cataloging. Sounds great, right? But flip to the friction column: limited funding and resource constraints, infrastructure gaps, privacy and ethical concerns, and a lack of AI-specific skills and governance policies. This pairing, drawn from Pandey and colleagues' 2026 systematic review, makes a crucial point explicit in that boxed statement at the bottom: the readiness of people, institutions, and policies matters just as much as the technology itself. I really want you to sit with that line for a moment. We tend to talk about AI adoption purely in terms of capability, but capability without readiness is just potential sitting on a shelf. So how are professionals actually navigating this friction in practice? Let's look at the tools they're reaching for. Take a look at this chart. ChatGPT, with its custom GPTs and integrations, leads clearly at 45 mentions. Gemini comes in at 17, Claude at 13, Copilot within Microsoft 365 environments at 8, and Grok trailing at 3. Now, at first glance you might read this as a simple ranking, a leaderboard of winners and losers. But that's not really the story here. The real insight is in that note beneath the chart. Professionals no longer rely on a single AI tool. They're selecting different models based on specific task strengths, whether that's drafting a literature review or handling a cataloging task. This is a meaningful shift from the early days of AI adoption, when everyone just picked one chatbot and used it for everything. Now we are seeing something more like a toolkit mentality, where each platform earns its place for a particular job. And nowhere is that specialization clearer than in how these platforms are dividing up the research lifecycle itself, which brings us to our next slide. Let's break the research process into 3 stages, because that's exactly how the AI tooling landscape is organizing itself. First, discover, moving beyond simple keyword search into genuine semantic academic paper discovery, with tools like Semantic Scholar, Scopus AI, and Web of Science Research Assistant leading here. Second, extract and summarize. This is about evidence extraction and answering natural language questions with real research backing, and Illicit and Consensus are the standout names in this space. Third, track and connect, visualizing relationships, citation mapping, and tracking how a field develops over time, with Research Rabbit, connected papers, and Litmaps doing the heavy lifting. Now here's the line I want you to remember from this slide. AI improves efficiency but supports, rather than replaces, critical evaluation of original sources. That's not a hedge, that's the whole point. These tools accelerate the work, but the judgment still belongs to us. And that specialization is pushing us toward an entirely new way of working, which is what we'll look at next. This slide captures a shift that I think a lot of researchers feel intuitively but haven't quite named yet. On the left, you've got the old fragmented workflow, papers, datasets, code, and drafts all living in separate silos, with researchers constantly context switching between databases, coding environments, visualization tools, and manuscript drafts. It's exhausting, honestly, and it's where a lot of research time quietly disappears. On the right, you've got what's being called the AI Workbench, using something like Claude Science as the example here. Papers flow into datasets, datasets into code, code into drafts, and drafts back into papers, all within a single connected environment. But notice the call-out at the bottom, because this is the part that matters most for us as information professionals. Transparent, traceable workflows allow outputs to be reviewed, reproduced, and validated, ensuring trust remains central to scientific progress. Efficiency without traceability isn't actually progress, it's just faster uncertainty. So given all these tools and workflows, how do we actually decide what to hand off to AI and what to keep firmly in human hands? That's exactly what we are covering next. This is, honestly, one of the most practically useful frameworks in this entire presentation, so pay close attention here. We've got to access, cost of error running low to high on the vertical, and human judgment required running low to high on the horizontal. That gives us 4 quadrants. Bottom left, automate, transcription, OCR, citation formatting, routine reminders. Low judgment needed, low cost if something slips. Top left, first draft, literature review summaries, reference responses, routine communications, but these require refinement before they go out the door. Bottom right, human oversight, metadata validation, MARC record enrichment, bibliometric reporting, budget projections, all requiring qualified review even though the judgment demand is higher. And top right, the one I want you to really absorb: do not use AI. Archival and rare collection decisions, copyright interpretation, fair use assessments, hiring, and patron conduct. High judgment, high cost of error, full stop. This matrix isn't about fear of AI, it's about precision in where we deploy it. And that precision is exactly what's reshaping what it means to be a competent library professional today. So if the delegation matrix tells us where AI belongs, this slide tells us what we, as professionals, need to bring to the table around it. 4 competency areas sit at the center of this evolving role. Advanced digitization means supervising AI-assisted transcription of handwritten and historical archival materials, not doing the transcription ourselves line by line, but overseeing its accuracy. Provenance and transparency means establishing rigorous attribution standards and documented workflows for AI-generated research, so nothing gets lost in translation about where information actually came from. Ethics and governance means leading cross-institutional collaborations to ensure trust, fairness, and responsible adoption, which is exactly the governance gap we saw back in that 90 versus 47% statistic. And integrated research support means embedding AI literacy into curriculum and providing guidance on these specialized research workbenches we just discussed. None of these competencies existed in quite this form a few years ago. This is the new shape of our profession. But none of this happens in a vacuum. It rests on a foundation that librarians themselves built. Let's talk about that foundation next. Look closely at this root diagram, because it's making a point that I think gets lost in a lot of AI conversations. At the top, you've got today's reality: AI systems instantly answering complex biomedical and academic questions with remarkable precision. Impressive, no doubt. But trace those roots downward, and you find decades of librarian advocacy, institutional repositories, metadata standard development, preprint sharing, and open access journal negotiations. None of that intelligence appeared out of nowhere. And the line underneath drives the point home: the intelligence we admire in these systems is built on the vast body of open access scholarship that information professionals spent decades assembling. This is, frankly, a moment of quiet pride for our profession, but it's also a responsibility. If we built the foundation these systems stand on, we have every right, and honestly every obligation, to have a voice in how they're used going forward. That responsibility is exactly what the next slide puts into words. I want to slow down on this one, because it's really the philosophical core of everything we've covered so far. Access without guidance is often only partial access. Read that again. It's easy to assume that once information is searchable, our job is basically done. But librarians understand that meaningful access involves more than making information searchable. We know the difference between information that is available and information that is genuinely usable. That difference is everything. It's the difference between a student finding 100 sources on a topic and actually understanding which 3 of them are trustworthy, relevant, and rigorous. We understand the importance of context, curation, literacy, and trust, and frankly, no algorithm replaces that understanding, it just makes the need for it more urgent. This idea sets up exactly where I want to leave you today, with a clear strategic imperative for higher education as a whole. So let's bring this all together into 3 concrete calls to action. First, update policy and curriculum, move beyond passive acceptance, institute formal AI guidelines, and embed continuous AI literacy training into academic programs. Second, invest in human readiness. Technology here is genuinely secondary. Success requires investing in staff competencies, ethical frameworks, and modern technological infrastructure. And third, architect the commons, continue to champion open access, provenance, and data transparency, so that the next generation of AI serves the public good rather than narrow interests. And then that closing statement, which I think should be printed and pinned above every library administrator's desk. We were not bystanders in creating this moment, we should not be bystanders in defining its future. That's the whole thesis, right there. Thank you so much for watching this breakdown. If this resonated with you, drop a comment about where your own institution stands on that 90 versus 47% gap we started with. And if you want to keep learning alongside other LIS professionals across South Asia, come join the AI4LIB community. See you in the next video.